Bell. So as I said, today we are going over local government, and on your Google Classroom, there is a Google Doc form there that you can fill out as we're going through. I'm going to share my screen here in a second. The first part of it is going over kind of basic federalism, a chart that should help you to understand what federalism is, which is a division of power between the three levels of government: national, state, and local. Just so you know what they're called, so that if you see those terms on the air test, they don't throw you. Then we're going to talk very briefly about the Ohio Constitution. It's just very brief changes that are actually the crux of what Ms. J put together for your assignment this week on local government. And then the final thing we're going to do is a quick, easy activity, just identifying the level and the branch of government based upon a scenario, which is very similar to what the air test asks you to do typically throughout, every year we have at least one question that asks that. So we're going to kind of go through those activities. I would really like it if some of you would be willing to unmute your mic at that point and answer questions. I know that that's against some of your religions, but please, 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 if you unmute and kind of participate, that's really going to help us get through this. And then you don't have to listen to my voice the entire time. So I'm going to start off by sharing my screen here and minimize that. Bring up, not my email, this one. There we go. All right. So if you bring up the actual Ohio Constitution sheet, the Zoom notes that are posted, you will notice that this chart starts off, and this chart is divvying up legislative, executive, and judicial, national, state, and local. Now, the first thing that I always like to do with this is to remind everyone what each branch does. So does anybody remember what the legislative branch does? Crickets, crickets, crickets. What does the legislative branch do?
Here we go.
They make the laws. Very good. Okay. They're the ones that kind of decide what laws need to occur. If you remember how a bill becomes a law, when you were doing the, the Schoolhouse Rock video, I'm just a bill. I'm only a bill. It starts off in the House. Okay. And then it goes to the Senate and all that kind of fun stuff. So the legislative branch makes the law. What does the executive branch do?
They enforce the law.
Very good. Hey, Timothy's doing it without any help from Ficker. Last bell, Ficker was definitely feeding some answers here. So Tim, you're doing great. So they enforce the law. Judicial branch, what do? Let's bring it home. Tim, you got this? Not to put you on the spot. You already got 2 of the 3. Folks, if you can't unmute, you can always use the chat function.
They don't. Don't they like decide the laws or over them?
Okay, so the word you're looking for is interpret. They tell us what they mean, okay? So they interpret the law. And again, this is where you get judicial review from. They look at the law and kind of say, well, this is in reality a tax, or this in reality is a violation of the Constitution. So again, that's what their role is. Now, these are divided up in national, state, and local levels. So we at least know what the national ones are called. Nationally, what is the legislature called at the national level? Who makes the laws at the national level?
Federal government.
Okay, a specific branch of the federal government. In this case, it is Congress. Congress is split into 2 groups, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. These are the ones that create the laws, that make the laws, okay? At the executive level, the one that actually carries them out or enforces them is the president. But he also has help from the cabinet, okay? These are the officials like the Secretary of State, the Secretary of the Treasury, you know, all the people that we did when we were, or talked about when we were talking about the line of secession, okay? These are the people that basically make all the decisions at the national level as to how to enforce the law, okay? Then at the national level, we have the Supreme Court, okay? And for that matter, the federal court system, but we're keeping it simple here. 9 justices on the Supreme Court, okay? Now, at the state level, we don't have a Congress. Even though we have a House of Representatives and a Senate at the state level, we don't call it a Congress. We actually call it something different. We call it the General Assembly. Okay? And again, this is a House and Senate. We call them the same things, at least when it comes to our 2 houses, but collectively they're called the General Assembly. At the state level, the person that makes all the decisions and executes the law is known as the governor. Okay. Many of you have noticed Mike DeWine on the news quite a bit over the past year, talking about, you know, the COVID situation at the national level, talking about, or at the state level, I should say, talking about how we're going to handle it within the budget. Some of your parents have had wine with DeWine at 2 p.m., talking about these different levels. So again, the governor controls the state level. At the state, or the executive level, I should say, at the state level of the judicial branch, we also have a Supreme Court, but it is the Ohio Supreme Court. The Ohio Supreme Court differs from the national Supreme Court in a number of different ways, but the main one that we're going to concern ourselves here, that kind of is linked to something that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes, is that if you are a member of the national Supreme Court, you're one of the 9 justices on the United States Supreme Court, you are placed there for life. As soon as you are appointed and confirmed by the Senate, as soon as you're appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate, you have a lifetime appointment. That's why they made such a big deal about Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, who were the 3 Trump appointees over the past few years, because as soon as they're placed on the Supreme Court, and all of them are in their late 40s and early 50s, if they live for another 30 years, let's say, that's 30 years that they're going to influence policies on the Supreme Court. That's a long tenure, okay, for a Supreme Court justice. So that's why they matter so much, is the younger they are and the longer they may serve just because of life expectancy, it's a lifetime appointment. There's no way to get rid of them otherwise. In Ohio, we did it differently. We said Supreme Court justices are going to be elected directly by the people. So they actually have to run for the Supreme Court. And we had 2 elections last year for the Supreme Court, one of whom switched parties, if you will. Now, they're not supposed to be members of the political party, but you know they are. Okay. One of them is a conservative justice, a Republican from this area who actually graduated from Northwest High School, Justice Kennedy, who has actually come here a couple of times to present to our students. Justice Kennedy is on the Supreme Court. She won re-election. The other one lost re-election to Justice Brunner. Justice Brunner is actually a liberal or a Democrat. She replaced Justice French, who had been there for quite some time. So we kind of set it up a little different, where an election can actually change the course of the Ohio Supreme Court, okay? And that goes along with our state constitution, allowing for officials to be directly elected by the people, okay? The local level is a little different when it comes to these 3 branches, and I'm going to explain here. Let's pretend we actually live in Cincinnati. Now, I know some of you are going to say, well, I do live in Cincinnati because my address says I live in Cincinnati, but you actually do not. You live in either Colerain or Springfield Township, which means at the local level, you are a township, and townships have what are known as trustees, okay? you have people that are elected specifically to look over the interests of the township. And again, you have put your trust in them, therefore they're called trustees. Now, if you lived in Cincinnati, the people that make the laws there would be considered a city council. Okay. So a city council, a little bit different. Okay. Again, this is Cincinnati. And here's the thing. If you are in Cincinnati City Council, a lot has been happening over the last few years in Cincinnati City Council. They've controversially put in a new rail line downtown, the connector. This light rail that's downtown, it's very controversial because it's very expensive. And a lot of people are not sure that we're going to be able to really kind of sustain it based upon the routes that it took. So that was highly controversial, and they've been in the news a lot recently because a few of the members of city council have done some shady things with some election funds and taken some donations from some pretty shady people. So that's been in the news quite a bit. If you take a new class that is being offered next year, CCP course, by the way, taught by the illustrious Mr. Flickinger, Joe Flickinger, who some of you may have had for modern U.S. and modern world, your freshman and sophomore years. And you will also have the tutelage of Mr. Ficker once again, because he will be taking the local government piece of it and talking to you about all the fun and games of local politics within the Cincinnati area, and of course extending to Ohio. And Mr. Flickinger will be talking about the local history. And keep in mind, that's pretty interesting because Mr. Flickinger is now up to his third published book on local history. So you want to talk about a guy that just knows his stuff. And if we can finally get through COVID, Ficker and Flickinger will get you on a bus and be driving you all around Cincinnati to see all the fun, exciting things in your city that maybe you just don't know about. And then, of course, have Mr. Flickinger regaling you of stories of what happened on what street corner in 1957 that is now, so important now. And he might even take you by the Buddy LaRosa mansion. You never know. But that's my plug for CCP, local government and local history. Again, taught by Flickinger and Ficker. So if you're looking for an elective next year, contact your counselor and say, hey, I want Ficker again. Or if you said, oh my God, Ficker's teaching it, then never mind. Anyway, at the executive level of the local government, you also have kind of an odd happening because at the township level, you still have the trustees in that position of enforcing the law because they handle both ends of the spectrum. Why? It's a local thing. It's a much smaller population within a township than an actual city. So it's usually much easier to just kind of put them all in the same capacity, all the powers in the same group. But that is not the same in a city. In a city, at some point I'll learn how to type. In a city, you have a mayor. So if you're in Cincinnati, you have Mayor John Cranley. Okay. This is kind of how cities always kind of run. You have a mayor actually running and enforcing the laws that the city council put into place. Okay. At the local level, when it comes to the judicial, it is a municipal court. This is the very local level of a court. Okay. The municipal courts basically run the day-to-day stuff at a local jurisdiction. So this is everything from you had a traffic violation to you have some family issues to where you had a run-in with the law, which is local. So you have to pay a fine or you have to serve some community service. Typically, that's all done by municipal courts. Okay. Local level stuff. Okay. Let's say you're driving down through Fairfield, you get pulled over by the police for speeding, or you have some sort of traffic violation of some sort. Basically, you would then show up to the Fairfield Justice Center and either pay the fine or actually schedule a court date. That's all municipal. That's local level stuff. Okay. Now this is kind of important for you to understand, and our activity here in a few minutes is going to kind of cover this chart here and test your knowledge of the chart. So hopefully you're kind of following along and filling out. Okay. Now, three major problems that were solved by the 1851 Ohio Constitution. This was covered in Miss J's activity this week, but I want to make sure you understand as well. In 1803, we became the 16th state in the United States. Now, when we originally wrote a constitution, we did not really foresee some of the problems that were going to occur as Ohio grew. Part of that was we were not really sure how big Ohio was going to get, and we actually got pretty large pretty fast. Others of it, we just didn't foresee the problems because we were modeling our original constitution on constitutions in states like Massachusetts that aren't as large as ours. Okay, so because of that, because of the land discrepancy, because we had so much territory, and because our population exploded a lot faster than we expected, we had to make some changes. Now, one of them is we realized our courts were being overwhelmed, so we created district courts, and by extension, municipal courts for that matter. We realized that the Ohio State Supreme Court couldn't handle everything. So we decided that we were going to create a lower level of court to handle some of the minutia and some of the problems that happen at the local level. So we actually elected local judges to actually do that. And you will notice that there are judges that are local, that are here. And we were making fun of Mr. Wagner recently because there's a Judge Chris Wagner. You know, like we saw his name and we keep on making fun that, oh, that must be him. In reality, it's one of your local judges, you know, that if you get in trouble at the municipal level, you might have to go see him in court. So again, that is a position that would have been created during the 1851 Ohio Constitution. Another thing that was created is highly controversial even up to this day is its debt limitation. We have a limit on how much debt the Ohio government can be in. In fact, we have basically, for lack of better terminology, a balanced budget measure here, that we can only spend what we take in. So this really does put a limitation on what the governor and, by extension, the Ohio State General Assembly can do. So to put it into kind of more human terms, more recent terms, if you remember last year when we first went on quarantine from COVID, one of the first things that the governor did in his budget is he kind of proposed a number of cuts to the education fund, which meant that, you know, in this district, it translated to some people actually lost their job because their positions were just eliminated. There were programs within our budget that were just taken out because, again, they were state level initiatives because we had to account for the fact that the state was cutting our budget. Now, a lot of people were very upset about this, but what they failed to realize is that DeWine really had no choice but to do that because he was not sure what the COVID effect on our state economy was going to be. He turned out to be correct. We were going to make less money in tax revenue because of the amount of people that were unemployed and because of the amount of shutdowns of businesses and other services that paid salaries. So in order to cover kind of for all the new jobless claims that they were going to have that they had to pay out, they had to cut other locations. Why? He can't just borrow money like the federal government does. This is basically saying the states cannot be like, or at least our state cannot be like the national government that just borrows money. As you did last week in your budget activity, you realize that the federal government is massively in debt. That can't happen at the state level. We cannot borrow. It's not like DeWine can just go to a bank and borrow money and then just start spending on programs. The Ohio State Constitution says he can't do that. So while it may not be great, and look, as somebody in education, I don't like hearing my governor saying, hey, we got to cut the budget. But as a social studies teacher, I get it. I understand why he has to do that, which is not easy to hear. But again, it's a necessity. Otherwise, he is in violation of the Constitution, which he cannot do. The last one is that executive officials at the national level, we call these people the cabinet. But at the state level, even though they kind of function as a cabinet, they are not nominated by the governor the same way the president nominates his cabinet. So when Joe Biden took office in January, he said, hey, this is who I want to be my attorney general for the national government. I want Merrick Garland to be my attorney general. So he had to send that nomination to the Senate, and the Senate had to say yes or no to Merrick Garland. They said yes, so Merrick Garland's going to be the attorney general of the United States. Okay, but every once in a while, the Senate could actually say no. Okay, and they have said no to a number of appointees from Biden as he took office. The executive at the state level, so our governor, doesn't have that problem. He has a different problem because according to the 1851 Constitution, executive officials are actually elected by the people. Okay, so you elect who our Secretary of State is for the state of Ohio. You elect who our state auditor is, who our state treasurer is, who our attorney general is in the state. Now, why does that create a new problem for the governor? This used to be handled by the legislative branch. The Ohio General Assembly would do that. But they realized that that might cause some corruption. So Ohio actually dodged a number of problems with political machines, at least at the state level, that other states were having major problems with throughout the 1800s by doing this, because the people got to elect their executive officials. Now, this puts DeWine in a bind a little bit, because what happens if the people elect somebody that's incompetent? Then DeWine has to kind of cover that. What happens if the people elect somebody from a different political party who may not agree with the direction of DeWine and some of the other Republicans, which has happened? There are some Democrats who have those statewide positions. They may not agree on policies. You might even get Republicans that don't agree on the policies. So again, it kind of creates a new problem, but the Ohio Constitution has kind of said, well, that's a better problem than corruption. So they certainly handled that. But those are the basic three major problems that the 1851 Ohio Constitution sought to solve. These are usually the three that come up on the air test. So just kind of keep in mind, it's budget, it's judicial appointments that we added to the judicial branch, and that we said executive officials have to be directly elected, which is why when you guys become voters, you will have elections every now and then where you have to pay attention to who the Secretary of State is, the Attorney General, all that fun stuff, because they're directly elected by you and not nominated by the governor. Now, the final little step to this activity is a situation activity, okay? These are situations, and this is very similar to what the air test does. And here's the situation, and I'm asking you to tell me what branch of the government and what level of the government. So is the branch, in this case, is the branch legislative, executive, or judicial? And is the level national, state, or local on these situations? Now, I have the chat room function operational if you don't want to unmute your mic, okay? And you can abbreviate, okay? You can, if I ask which branch it is, you can put, instead of legislative, executive, or judicial, you can just put L, E, or J, and we'll know what you mean. All right, so the situation here is the council votes to impose a tax for the construction of a new public transit system. What branch is described here? The council votes to impose a tax for the construction of a new
Judicial.
public transit system.
Judicial.
Is the council judicial?
Probably not.
It is not. If you look at your chart, a council is what branch?
Local.
Okay, so the level is local. Okay, so the level is local.
Legislative.
It's legislative. Very good, Taylor. All right. So legislative, okay? The legislative branch is covered by the city council, okay? And at the local level. All right, the next one. The president decides to open trade negotiations with Venezuela. What branch would the president be referring to?
Isn't the executive branch in charge of like?
Very good. It's executive. Okay. The executive would do that. And since it's the president, what level? National, state, or local? Again, you can always use the chat function if you don't want to unmute your microphone.
National.
National. Monolito coming out of nowhere. There you go. So national. Very good. All right, the next one. The assembly passes a bill to limit the tuition a college can charge a student. If it's the assembly, what branch are we talking about?
Legislative.
It is legislative. Very good. And since it's the assembly, out of the national, state, or local, who refers to their legislative branch as the assembly?
State.
The state. Very good. I'd compliment my students, but none of them are here. So, Ficker, this is all yours. All right. The Supreme Court finds the Affordable Care Act is a tax and therefore constitutional. Well, Which branch has
Judicial.
the Supreme Court? It is judicial. And if it's the Supreme Court, what level?
National.
It's national. The Ohio Supreme Court decides to uphold a motion for clemency, which is a delay of a death row inmate. So they're not forgiving them, but they are either granting them no death penalty or at least a stay of execution, so to speak. That's what clemency means. Okay. The Ohio Supreme Court, what branch?
Judicial.
It's judicial. And since it's Ohio, it's a state. Okay. The mayor signs into law a new traffic pattern in the downtown utilizing roundabouts. If it's a mayor, what branch are we talking about?
Executive.
Executive. And a mayor would be national, state, or local?
Low.
Local. Okay, only a few more. The Congress passes a series of resolutions on climate change.
Legislative.
It is legislative. And since it's Congress,
National.
national. The Secretary of State meets with the leaders of the European Union. This one's a little tricky. This threw him off last bell. Let's start with what level. Is it national, state, or local if the Secretary of State is meeting with the European Union?
National.
National, because if they're meeting with a foreign government, only the national government does that, okay? Now, the Secretary of State would be part of what organization at that point?
Executive.
Okay, it's part of the cabinet, so therefore it is executive. Very good. This one threw people off last bell, so well done, okay? They are part of the executive branch because they're part of the cabinet, okay? The municipal court rules all traffic violations from a recent snowstorm are pardoned, which means forgiven, okay? What branch?
Judicial.
It is judicial. National, state, or local?
Low.
Local. Those traffic violations and problems are all local in the courts. So the governor nominates a fellow Republican to the vacancy on the Supreme Court. Since it's the governor doing it, what branch are we talking about?
Executive.
Executive. This is where they throw you off because they mentioned Supreme Court. Now, sometimes the air test will say, hey, which two branches? And you have to kind of identify that it's executive and judicial. But it's sometimes they're just saying which one is taking the action. Since the governor is nominating, it is executive. Okay. Since the governor, what level?
National.
It's not national. National would be president.
State.
It is a state. Okay. The last one, the assembly passes a bill replacing air tests with a new form of examination. If it's the assembly, what branch?
Legislative.
Legislative. And what level?
State.
Very good. Monolito and Tim, you earn the extra points today if Ficker's nice enough to give them to you. Taylor, for that matter, as well. Thank you for participating, folks. All right, if you followed along with this, you should have this already filled out, and you should be able to turn it in for a quick and easy 25 points in government class. And I'll just leave this up for a few seconds for those of you that are trying to kind of maybe fell behind from the very beginning here. I'll scroll down in a couple of seconds here, but I'll at least utilize the next couple of seconds to remind you that spring break, and I don't need to remind you that spring break is is upon us here, starting on Friday. However, I want to remind everybody in the meeting that the air diagnostic quizzes and the questionnaires that go along with them are due. And again, as soon as the air test happens, they go to permanent zeros if you did not do them. Keep in mind, these are just assignments where you're taking the diagnostics, and regardless of what you got, I had somebody in my third bell tell me, oh my God, I got a 0 on one of the diagnostic quizzes. Does that mean I fail? No. They got a 0 on the local government one, the Ohio Constitution one. I expected them to get that because we haven't gone over it yet. And that student had not done Miss J's assignment yet. She had not done any of the work on local government before taking that diagnostic. After she did the assignment for Miss J, I said, go ahead and retake that quiz. And she got an 8 out of 14 instead of a 0. So do you understand it a little bit better? She said, yes, I do. I get it a lot better now that I've kind of gone over it. We expect you to do somewhat poorly on some of these diagnostics. Now, of course, if you're getting like a 2 out of 53 on the amendments, that's really disconcerting to Vicar and me, that not only do you not know your amendments, you can't even guess a couple of them, So again, if you're scoring pretty low on that, we're going to ask you to retake those over and over again to put yourself in a better position to take the air test on Thursday after spring break. I know it's not high on your to-do list, but please go through those quizzes, get used to the formatting of them, get used to what they're asking. And of course, the questionnaire is the actual grade associated. So if you do the questionnaire, if you tell us where you're really kind of struggling, which we can tell kind of out of your diagnostic where you're really struggling, and most of you are doing a great job of pinpointing the terms or the concepts that you're really kind of struggling with. So the questionnaires have been fantastic so far. You're very much kind of telling us it's way better than the old exit slips. You're actually kind of telling us accurately where your struggles are, which is fantastic. Again, as soon as you turn those in, as soon as you hit submit on those questionnaires, you automatically get 50 points for the week. So if you have not done those yet, you need to do those ASAP, because again, once you get back from spring break, we're going to be in test mode until that Thursday, and then everything disappears. And just the diagnostic tests alone are 150 points. Then there's a primary source packet. I actually did an open Zoom the other day where I went through the primary source packet and helped people in my fifth bell with the primary source quiz. That's a 60-point quiz. If you watch that video, you should theoretically do very well. Okay, so there is no reason for you to not do the video and have the quiz up and just go question by question through it and get a pretty decent grade. It's all effort based. Another reminder, you had other assignments every week. You had in week 1 a modern civil rights assignment. In week 2 you had a financial assignment where you had to play a game and research a little bit about the United States budget. And then this week you had one over local government, again by Miss J. Those were 50 points apiece as well. So if you're currently failing government, it's for lack of effort. It's not because you got confused on something. You just haven't done the work. So again, I encourage you to log back on, get those things done and turned in so that you don't get shut out of hundreds and hundreds of points before we come back from break. After break, we're going to transition after the air test into the financial literacy unit, which is a big component of the fourth quarter. And then your final project, which is the personal political platform project. But you don't want to be sitting there hoping that your financial literacy and your political platform project make up for a 0 in the diagnostics, which literally were, did you log in and take the quizzes? Okay, so let's not fall too far behind in fourth quarter on effort-based assignments. Questions, comments, concerns from any of you?
No.
Okay, Ficker's room is getting invaded right now, so I'm not going to ask him any questions out of fear of what Flickinger or Posta would say on the microphone. So I will stop sharing here. If you have questions, obviously you can reach out through email. You can reach out through office hours. Again, we don't have traditional office hours anymore, but you can certainly request them through email and just say, hey, I need a little bit of help on these quizzes. Can you possibly set aside some time? And we will make time for you. Otherwise, folks, we want you to have a happy and restful spring break, and we will see you back here in a couple of weeks. All right, about a week and a half. If you have no questions, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you soon.